Today I have a really special guest for you, and I know I get excited about a lot of the episodes that I am fortunate enough to record, but Randall Crowder is an incredible human who spent time deployed in Afghanistan and Iraq with the US military. He's gone on and started as effectively a venture capitalist, building from the outside in and transitioning to being an operator. And we talked about a lot of philosophical points and around the mindset of what it takes to get going. And also from the lens of an investor, what Randall used to look for when he was investing in companies. And so, again, one of my favorite episodes that I've had the fortune of recording to date. He's just an incredible guy, and I left extremely motivated, as I'm sure you will once you get into this episode. So, like always, buckle up, sit back, relax and enjoy, because this is a barn burner. Welcome to Successful Scales, the show where I talk to world-class professionals on what it takes to scale successful businesses. I dive deep asking questions to people who are running unicorn businesses, to raising funds, to buying businesses, mergers and acquisitions, IP and patent law, what is to manage performance management. I mean, the list goes on. The idea really is, how do I create knowledge and learning for you guys listening in? And of course, myself, getting the floor with people who I, in many cases, would never dream to share a room with. Before we jump into the episode, I've got to give a special thank you to our sponsors. Firstly, over at Global Wide Advisors, a leading digital consumer products investment bank focused on optimizing the sales process. An incredible team, always happy to pick up the phone and educate you or anyone about the sales process and what you should really consider, and can obviously help take you to market or even acquire businesses. I ring them for just about everything these days. Us over at Multiply Me, we are the end-to-end executive search and HR function into the Philippines, helping find better talent and onboarding them effectively. And last but not least, Escala, our management consultancy focused on process improvement, where we help build better systems for your business. That's all the ads you're going to get from me, ladies and gentlemen. The rest is all about learning. I hope you really enjoy and get as much out of these sessions as I do, sitting face-to-face with some of the world-renowned leaders in their respective fields, asking them the tough questions that they're not often asked. All right, Randall, mate, welcome to an episode of Successful Scales.
Thank you for having me. I really appreciate it. I'm excited to be here. You're growing fast, and so I'm honored to be here.
Mate, I am equally as honored having you as a guest. And, you know, we were introduced through our good friend Todd, who's a legend. Shout out to you, Todd Armstrong. Big fan.
Man, he's a force of nature. He's a force of nature. When he says, he goes, Randall, you're going to like this guy. I'm like, I'm in. I'm all in. If he says I'm going to like somebody, I already know they're good people.
I feel the exact same way. So thanks a lot, Todd. But, mate, this episode isn't about Todd. It's about you, and it's about adding value, obviously, to entrepreneurs all over the globe. So, I love to start this off, and rather than looking at your incredible history and trying to recite from, the links that I've seen and the research that I've done, I'd much prefer for the listeners to hear a little bit about your journey from straight from the horse's mouth, if you will. So, mate, I'll hand it over to you.
Yeah. I appreciate it. I'll try to go fast because and I think we can kind of dive into different buckets, throughout the journey. But I will say, totally truthfully, I've made a career out of collecting jobs I'm utterly not qualified for. And so that's probably why I had to be an entrepreneur, because I just keep, making it up as I go. But I got my start, so I'm old, my birthday's on Thursday.
So I turned 42. Mine's on Wednesday. Happy birthday.
Is it? Oh, Leo. See, that's why I knew I liked you. You're a Leo. So that makes much more sense now.
You look good. You look good for 42.
So happy early birthday.
You look good for 42. I'll be
Thank you.
35.
Oh, man. You know what? I wish I could go back in time, but no. So I graduated high school many moons ago in 98. And then ended up going to West Point, ironically. And so I didn't come from a military family. It was one of those things. This was probably the first instinct that I had around, me as a human being. And it was, what do I do when faced with a challenge? And I remember back then I had no desire to be in the military. And I was going to go to UT, and I was having a great time in high school, and I was going to have an even better time in college. And I was like any other kid that, wanted to have a good time. And then it kind of, through a weird series of events, this opportunity kind of came to light. And it was like that soul searching moment. The first time I can remember being an adult, and it was like, okay, I'm presented with this challenge. Should I go for it, or should I self-select out? And I could have easily just been like, no, I'm already accepted to UT, I'm going to go do this. And then I kept thinking, I was like, I wonder if one day I'll regret that. And I'm sure a lot of the listeners here know, there's only two pains in life, the pain of discipline or the pain of regret. And so I chose the pain of discipline. I said, all right, you know what, I'm going to apply. And in the back of my mind, I kind of kept thinking, I'm probably not going to get in, so this is a win-win. I can tell myself that I tried, and I can still go to UT and party. Well, lo and behold, I got in. So then I had this other soul-searching moment, was like, oh man, this just got real. And it was, again, I think something that's underscored in my life. If presented with a challenge that is daunting, do it. That's kind of a sign that you're going in the right direction. When it gets hard, when it gets like, I don't know if I can do this, man, do it. And so I went. Now, and I still, in the back of my mind thought, what's the worst that could happen? Rumsfeld's downsizing the Army. We haven't been in a war in almost a decade. A lot of people at the time were getting paid, $75,000 to get out of the Army. So they're not even serving their full commitment after graduating, which is 5 years. So me and a good friend of mine at the time, we were thinking like, hey, you know what? I didn't come from a wealthy family. I was like, this is a great way for my parents not to have to pay for school. They can use that money for their own life and their own nest egg. And we'll probably get paid to get out of the Army, so no big deal. Senior year, going into our first class after 9/11, I had this real just almost right out of a cartoon, chiseled jaw. Old, I think he had jumped into Grenada. This guy was just, he was everything you could imagine of like an American warfighter. And we walk into class, and we sit down, and he's kind of looking around at us, and we're all shook because we just watched, 9/11 happen. And he looks around and he goes, well, cadets, you're all going to war. I was like, oh, shit. And so that was like when it kind of hit me, and it was real that like whatever I thought I was going to do, I was no longer going to do. Luckily, at that point, I had grown up. And so, I fully embraced the military, got out in 2002, went to Ranger school, went to, so Airborne selection, Ranger selection, ended up deploying with the 82nd, but I was actually serving with 1st Cav at the time. We got attached to them in 2003 in the beginning of the war. Did 2 deployments in total for about 3 years, came back. It's one of those things where, it's an incredible experience, but, and we can get back to that in a second. But again, I never wanted that to define me. I think a lot of people were surprised that I got out of the military. I was very much all in, and I was pretty good at my job. And we did a lot of, very difficult things and challenging things. But I think I always knew that wasn't going to be my life. Like I wanted to see what else life had to offer. This was going to be a chapter, not a full book. And so I got out in 2008 and really set about my entrepreneurial journey in the private sector. And what I realized at the time was there was a lot of entrepreneurial things that had happened while I was in the military that actually prepared me for it. And so, one note we can come back to, because I know you're in Tel Aviv, I tell people this all the time. One of the most incredible books is Startup Nation. And it's this dichotomy of 2 different countries with a lot of similarities, but they approach things in different ways, and I wonder why. Israel really credits a lot of its entrepreneurial ecosystem and its passion for innovation to the service that everybody has to provide the nation. And it's kind of incredible because in America, everyone kind of thinks, well, you were in the Army, like what skills do you have? You're going to get out and be a security guard, or you're going to, maybe you were in supply chain management, you'll get out and go work for some, large manufacturing plant. Like what skills do you have? And it couldn't be further from the truth. Our men and women who serve have skill sets that they haven't figured out how to uncover yet or how to articulate yet. And I saw it, especially, in Iraq and Afghanistan, and just we were fighting a war that no one had ever fought before with no playbook and no understanding of what to do. And we had to make it up as we went along. That's entrepreneurship. It was a matter of life and death, figuring out how to lead teams in asymmetric situations, in small units, and step up, but also delegate and understand who does what. Like that's leadership. I mean, we talked about this before we started. Operations, like every business needs that just as much as they need a good idea or passionate people. And so I think I learned a lot about entrepreneurship being in the military, but obviously I wanted to go do something else. I'll go fast and then we can kind of go back and unpack it. Ended up, first thing that I recommend every entrepreneur do, make a list of 100 people you want to meet and then set about trying to meet those people. I did that when I got out of the Army. 50 people blew me off. Guess what? That's life. 20 people kind of, kicked the can down the curb. I met with maybe 5 of them, but a good 30 people were like, sure, well, let's meet, let's talk. And I really just wanted to pick their brain. It's what you have the fortune of doing every day. And also doing it when you're in the guest seat, just ripping with people and not asking for something. You're just like trying to, you're staying motivated by talking to other people. Iron sharpens iron. But then you're also inquisitive about what mistakes they made, where they went. And people that are good people are willing to tell you, I made that mistake. Don't make that mistake. And so I wanted to go about doing that with people who I was impressed with their career journey. And so did that, ended up meeting a gentleman named Admiral Bobby Inman. He used to be the deputy director of the CIA, early investor in Dell and Oracle, and he was a venture capitalist. And so at the time, and this is another important point for entrepreneurs, I didn't have a big idea. I didn't have the next Facebook in my heart. I knew I wanted to do something. I knew I wanted to build something or be a part of something, but I wasn't going to force it. I knew that I wanted it to be something that I was really passionate about. Steve Jobs talks a lot about that. And so I thought, well, you know what? What's the next best thing? Why don't I learn the other side of the table? I'll start working with investors so that I understand how they approach entrepreneurs. And I get to see and meet a bunch of entrepreneurs. And so I set about trying to meet a bunch of investors. And luckily, Admiral Inman gave me a shot. Long story short, I led with value rather than asking for something, did a few things for him that he was impressed with, gave me more rope to be able to get involved in the community, ended up meeting a local angel investor named Jamie Rhodes. He started Central Texas Angel Network. Funny enough, they were looking for an executive director. They had just started it. And I remember asking them, I was like, hey, who are you looking for, as a new executive director of this angel network? And they basically profiled Elon Musk. And I was like, I hate to break it to you. I don't think Elon Musk is going to run your angel network. This is glorified secretarial work. And so my dad used to always tell me, like, you never get what you don't ask for. And so I put together a plan on how to run an angel network, without being told, without being asked. And it was basically in the Army what we call a standard operating procedure. So I spent about the entire summer, so this is now the summer of 2008, kind of preparing this document because I was going to start grad school. I got my MBA here at UT at McCombs, and I was going to start grad school anyway. So I was like, you know what? Why don't I do this? And so I presented it to them, said, I'll work for free. I'll do this. And they were like, it was like, hundreds of pages. They were like, Jesus, like you did this like on your own for free? They're like, all right, you got the job. And so it was the best way to do a job interview, adding value rather than asking how to add value or asking for a paycheck or asking for money, because I wanted access. I wanted to learn. And so I grew that angel network to be the most active angel network in the country within 4 years. During that same time, got my MBA at McCombs, started an accelerator called Texas Venture Labs at UT, so I can talk about the nightmare that it is establishing an accredited organization at a prestigious university. That was fun. And that was all about experiential learning for me. I was getting so much experience in the real world. I wanted to provide that to other graduate students. And then, I'll skip to the end. Interestingly enough, when I was running the Angel Network, I helped with the first $1.5 million to start Phunware back in 2009. Fast forward to about 2017, I put about $3 million into our last private round before we were going public, just as an investor. And the old COO ended up having to step away for some personal health reasons. And they said, hey, you ready to give up? I spent about a decade as a venture capitalist. I had my own fund focused mostly on tech-enabled healthcare. And I was like, I still liked where Phunware was going. A decent part of the business was healthcare related, and we talk about that later. But the CEO, a gentleman named Alan Natowski, said, hey, you ready to kind of hang up the VC hat and get into the ring and do this entrepreneurship thing with me and grow the company? And I knew I would only do it for a very special company, and I think Phunware is special. And so I said yes, and it's been it's almost 5 years now, and never looked back. It's been a great ride. I loved being able to see both sides of the table, but I love now being kind of one team, one fight. I know it's how you feel about your 300 plus employees. Just really having that singular vision and mission. That's different than being an investor where you're kind of a backseat driver.
Wow. Is all I have to say with just how many lessons, honestly, if someone was really listening to what you were saying and how you've approached every stage of your personal, professional development, what you could actually take from how you lead with value and how you have always looked to create that value and not asked for, give me this and I will, and I will deliver that. It's really lead from that value first. And yeah.
It really is. I think a lot of people, I don't think they do it as much. And so along this way, I also did a Kauffman Fellowship, which is a 2-year fellowship in Silicon Valley. And it was kind of the whole mission of the organization is to kind of train the next generation of great venture capitalists. And now they've kind of expanded the mission to just be all things innovation and entrepreneurship. And I'll never forget, the gentleman who kind of is responsible for a lot of the growth and was the CEO at the time, and Phil Wickham. He taught me a very important lesson. This was probably 2010. And I was surprised I got in. So if anybody doesn't know Kauffman Fellows, it's really prestigious. They have all sorts of, incredible people that I look up to as members. And they only, at the time when I was joining, they only select about 15 to 20 people to go through this 2-year fellowship in the Valley. And I remember the very first meeting we had, we're all sitting around and everybody's doing their introductions, and literally, gentleman sitting next to me is like on his third PhD. One person was like a Nobel Prize, runner up. Another person was an Olympian. One guy was running like BBC. It was just like, Lord. And so it got to me, and I had been, I was 2 years out of the military, and I said it jokingly, but I think if I'm being honest, I wasn't joking. And I was like, well, I'm the class, you have classes, I was class 15. I was like, I was the class's, hi everybody, I'm the class's charity case. And, I kind of thought like, I'm the one that they, we better throw in the token military guy just for optics. And man, Phil was pissed. And he goes, he was pissed in a lighthearted, mentor-like way. He said, listen, one, don't ever disclaim yourself, ever. It does you a disjustice, an injustice, and it does the people who believe in you an injustice. We did not select you lightly. You were interviewed, you were researched, we picked you. Don't devalue yourself or our decision to pick you. And it was like a very stern, I was back to being a kid, being scolded by my dad, but it stuck with me. And he's right. That negative self-talk is deadly. It's debilitating. And a lot of people do it. Even if they don't say it out loud, they're saying it to themselves. You deserve to be in the room you're in. Why? Because you're in it. If you found your way into the room, you deserve it. You deserve to be behind, the camera and that mic. Why? Because you built it. You have every right to be proud of the things you do, even if you're out over your skis, because being out over your skis just means you're hustling and you're working and you're hard. Now I'm old, but there was a time where I was always the youngest guy in the room, and that always made me uncomfortable. In venture capital, it's all these old, gray-haired, rich family offices and large investment funds, and I'm always thinking like, man, do I deserve to be here? Well, nobody wants to invest in that guy or that girl. They want somebody who walks in and understands the value they add, what they can give, and also what they want. That exchange of value is also important. And so I think that's something that everybody should really keep in mind when they think about their skill sets and the positions they find themselves in. You deserve to be there because you're there.
Yeah, I think you hit on a few interesting points when you talk about that that negative self-talk is never going to serve you. But I think that there is definitely a dissemination between that and, the feeling of imposter syndrome. Like, should I be here? Should I be there? I feel like the imposter syndrome, for me personally, is a healthy dose of wanting to continue to sort of push forward and elevate my learning and know that I've earned the deserving right to be in the rooms that I've, very gratefully find myself in. And I had another point. Another point about your position, but I think to your point, it is so much about your internal belief and that commitment to driving forward. And as soon as you let that down, like I think, the difference between the difference between sort of a entrepreneur and an entrepreneur is, having the grit to actually get your skin in the game and actually push forward. And you're going to have millions, maybe not millions, but you're going to have plenty of deflating moments, and you're going to have plenty of situations where things did not go your way. But ultimately, if you have that self-belief and that confidence that you deserve to be in the places that you're in, it sort of overrides a lot of the challenges that you'll face on the day-to-day. And you actually had a line, and you said at the start, like I'm sure everyone's heard it before. I actually hadn't. It's pain of discipline or pain of regret, and I love that. And I just love to sort of hear how you have applied that to your life. I'm looking at you. To me, I'm just seeing sort of the top side of your chest, but to me, you look like you're built like a CrossFitter. Are you a CrossFitter?
I'm not. I've martial arts my whole life, and I just work out a lot. But no, CrossFit, I like the idea of it. But I think early on when it got popular, everybody I knew was always injured. So I was always like, I love working out so much. It's like my meditation, my zen. I was like, I don't want to get injured, but like I love functional work. So I don't do straight bodybuilding. I do like a lot of functional, squatting, lunging, complex and compound movements, but maybe not as crazy as CrossFit.
Yeah, look, I used to do it 10 years ago competitively, and I ruined my butt.
Oh, wow, really?
I ruined my body, though. I ruined my body. Slipped my L4, L5, tore my labrum. And now, it's all, I think, more akin to what you're doing in functional training, squatting, weighted chin-ups, still heavy weights now, but not for time. Yeah. There's no stopwatch. I separate the cardio and the heavy lifting. Those two, I don't think they should really go together. It is impressive.
I'm with you. I'm with you.
Damage. Anyway, mate, I'm just sort of really impressed with the way in which you've approached, your entry into the private markets and how you've gotten there. Before we sort of jump into that, because I'm sitting here very curious, I guess from the lens of how you've built your career as effectively as an investor and then working your way backward into being an operator. I think it'll lend itself to a very interesting perspective. So I want to dig into that. But what I'll say about your military career, my co-founder, which I didn't tell you, spent 4.5 years in the military.
Really?
So he's Australian as well, but moved to Israel to serve. He was very idealistic about Israel. They wouldn't take me. I was 30 when I moved here. I'm 35 now, as I said, and there's a cutoff. Not that I was actively looking to serve at that point in my lifetime, but I'll say that there is absolutely, he came and we started working together where he had, before this business, we were in another business together, and he was my intern. We worked together, and it was very apparent the very transferable skill sets that he'd learned after having a platoon of, up to about 100 soldiers sat under him when he was in an elite combat unit in the military for 4 years and did an officer's course and commander's course. And there's something to be said, and he also sits in the COO role, much like you do as well in your current state. And, it's that ability to manage and lead people. It's that ability to understand systems and processes, because you've dealt with things at a level where, you were deployed in Afghanistan and Iraq. Like things can really go wrong. If you don't have that, total accountability and responsibility, and you don't take on the processes and the systems and drill it time and time again, you're in a bad spot. So, I have a deep appreciation for what that brings to the table, because we wouldn't be where we are and we wouldn't be running 3 companies concurrently if it wasn't for sort of the yin and yang that him and I play in, that he is such a strong operator and a great leader and manager of people. So, Anyway.
I love that. Before you go on, it spurs something, a thought that I wish someone would have told me earlier, but I'm glad I got told when I did. And it was Admiral Inman again. And he said, one of the biggest challenges is this natural conflict between being a type A personality, but only being able to scale if you can delegate. And, we kind of unpacked that a little bit. And it was like, okay, well, what do you mean? He said, the biggest challenge you will face, or one of the biggest challenges you will face as a leader, and even manager, and we can go into the difference between a leader and a manager later, but when you can get an A at a task, and maybe somebody else only can get a B- at the same task, it might be better for the whole for you to let that person get a B- so you could focus on something else where you can get an A+. But the weight of that A+ is greater than the missed opportunity of your A and their applied opportunity of their B-. And it's like, I know you're right, but it's so hard to give up things when somebody else maybe doesn't even do them worse than you. Maybe they just do them differently than you. And you're you want to basically, and especially when it's your baby and it's your, especially as you begin to grow your team, it's easy when it's 2 guys in a garage and you're just ripping, but now it's 10, it's 20, it's 30, and you can't micromanage them. You just will never scale. You will absolutely fail. And you've got to trust in them that you've, not only trained them, but you've resourced them. And then you let them do it, even if maybe they do it differently, and even if sometimes they fail, even at things that you wouldn't have failed at, that's okay, that's part of it, and you got to learn how to organizationally manage in a way that gives up some of that control. And that's a hard thing for type A people to figure out.
Yeah, I think I love that analogy. And, one of the things that Lippy, my co-founder, preaches and what we preach. So I haven't even talked to you about what our companies do, but one of them is a process improvement management consulting practice where we design systems for e-commerce businesses. We've got about 35 ex-EY, Accenture, Deloitte, McKinsey management consultants out of the Philippines, and that's what we do. And Lippy actually spearheaded and really built out a lot of the functionality inside of that business. And one of our metrics, or one of the things we talk to people about, is if someone can get your job to 80% of where you would say it's great, delegate it. That's the moment where you pass it on, because
I like that.
Yeah, but I really like the way in which you broke it down too. So yeah, I feel like I got to connect you with Lippy. The two of you will really be able to riff.
I want to. I'm going to hold you to that.
I would gladly connect you guys. But mate, I am super, super interested to hear, and I think a lot of the listeners would be too. I mean, you sort of made that transition. We can go back to talking about the military in a little bit. I mean, I'm always fascinated about the experiences and the learnings there. And, I can only imagine some of the things that I would say actually, unfortunately, had to bear witness to, just given the time in which you were in the military and what was going on at the time. But, you've sat, I say, for the bulk of your professional career as an investor. And I think that you're really coming at it from that lens. You're learning a very different skill set, and while it might not be heavy on the operations, like you sort of really probably more eloquently put than I will right now, is these old rich white guys have the capital to deploy, and they're sort of looking at it from that lens, and they're not operating these businesses, but you sort of worked your way into it. You put the work in, and you earned your seat at the table. And so I'm curious to understand, for anyone who's out there looking to raise capital, for anyone that's actually looking to approach VCs, and we can talk about the networks that you built to date, what are some of the key criteria that you're looking at? Is there a blanket catch-all of when we start our diligence process, these are 4 or 5 things that won't even make it to the early diligence stage? What does that process look like for you?
Well, it's a great question. And it's funny because that's exactly why I got into it, because I wanted to learn all the I know what you're saying, but what do you actually mean? And there's little things a VC is never going to sign an NDA. They just see too many deals. But an entrepreneur can always ask for them to sign an NDA. Now, if it's the formula for Coke, okay, maybe I get it. But for the most part, I refuse. I don't think I ever signed an NDA in 10 years as an investor. It's like, don't tell me your idea then. I don't care. Like, go do something else. It's like, there's just not, it puts an investor in a very hard place, because an entrepreneur could come back and be like, well, you stole my idea, but your idea was a social network. You can't tell me that I stole it from you. That's just common knowledge. So there's all these, that's a very small, tiny, tactical thing. I think what you're asking, and more broadly speaking, and it sounds stupid, but it's so true. There's a video going around with Kevin O'Leary talking about this for the Shark Tank. And when someone walks in, within the first 90 seconds, you just know. There's an aura, there's a presence, how you handle yourself, and it's not cockiness. There's a certain aura that you give off when you know your stuff. That's the best thing to overcome nerves, and you're always going to be nervous. But like when Olympians, they've actually done studies on this, where Olympians interpret the exact same chemical responses to the body that for somebody else creates panic and fear because of nerves. They process it as adrenaline, like, let's go. And so it's not, yes, adrenaline is present in both, but what you do with that input is different, as for like a very high level athlete versus somebody who's going to let it consume them and get stage fright and freak out. And so understanding how to interpret those signals and be excited about the opportunity, because you're prepared and you're respecting the other person's time, first and foremost, is key, because people are going to be the thing they look at first. Who are you? What are you trying to do? Why should it matter? And so when you come in, and this is probably the biggest thing that nobody ever says, because it honestly, it bothers me sometimes. VCs do not. This is what a VC will look like while you're pitching.
Yep.
So isn't Google doing this? No? Okay. And it's real off-putting. Now, some of them do it because they're being disrespectful. Some of them do it to see how you react. Some of them, it's like a game. I'm not going to give you any feedback, and I want to see if you keep going, because there's this game of, do you have to fill the silence? Another lesson from Admiral Inman in negotiating. When you are saying something, and you'll hear lawyers talk about this if they're prepping you for like a deposition. Say what you have to say it tight, and then stop talking. And whoever talks first loses. And be okay with that silence. So, the VCs will wonder, just kind of, do you start giving too much information? Do you start filling that void? So sometimes they'll be a little bit cold. They're always evaluating people. Before you even start talking about your business, they're just evaluating you. Did you show up prepared? How do you handle, some maybe interruptions? You're in the middle of the pitch. Hold on. Hey, Marcy. And it's like, whoa, I was in the middle of my pitch. I had it all memorized. And now it's like throwing me off. Like, can I get back onto my pitch? So there's all these like little silly things that will be done that aren't actually rude. They're actually just seeing how you respond to it, because people are what you're investing in. People are the ones that are going to have to pivot the business, because the business you're pitching is not going to last. It will change for whatever reason, market, conditions, product market fit, doesn't matter. It will change. And so they want to see how you react. And then the biggest thing, and I did this a lot, and unfortunately a lot of people can't figure out how to solve this, is skin in the game. I got presented a really interesting business by people who had all the credentials in the world. They were both, one of them was a hedge fund manager, so he had more money than anybody. He had already been successful. One was a successful entrepreneur a couple times over. And I asked them, like, all right, what do you guys, how much do you have in the deal? Like, how much are you putting into this round? And they said, well, nothing. That's what we're here for. We're here talking to you for the money. Like, oh, you want to play with the house's money? Okay, yeah. I don't hold that against them at all. If you can, build your business on someone else's risk and someone else's capital, absolutely do it. Sometimes people have the resumes to pull that off. For me, I was more impressed with actually the very next person that pitched. She was a teacher who had cashed out her 401k, remortgaged her parents' house, had 2 credit cards that were past their balance and had no balance left. And she was like trying to put, one kid through college, and then she had another younger kid earlier on in life. And so it was like she had to make this company a success. Like she was all in. And those kind of entrepreneurs, they will run through walls. They're the ones that are not, they don't have a clock. It is hustle, work, and progress. And ultimately, she was much more successful than the other two who quit. So what I was evaluating was, what is your walk away factor? If you can walk away and leave me as an investor holding the bag very easily, I'm not interested. I want to know that it hurts. And it doesn't have to be a lot. I'm not saying that you have to put $1 million of your own money into the deal. Sometimes 10,000 is all someone has, and it's all the money in the world to them. I'm actually more interested in that than the person who can put $1 million into the deal. Because sometimes the person who puts $1 million in the deal, they don't care. They've got 20 in the bank. And so I really want people who can go beyond motivation. And the only way you go beyond motivation, which is you can be in state or out of state with motivation, is pure conviction. And conviction is something that will make you do stuff even when you don't want to do it. Steve Jobs always talks about, some successful entrepreneurs are just ones that persevered a little longer. Well, conviction makes you persevere. It's like, I want to stop. I can't stop. I'm all in. And I love that. So, and then I get to the product. And the other last lesson, I'll tell you this, there's plenty more, but these are the two most important. What's your walkaway factor? And then what have you done? I'm going to evaluate what you've done. See, a lot of people love to over-engineer their idea. They're actually scared to put it into the hands of customers. They're scared to get out there and be told their baby's ugly or that something doesn't work. And you have to put something out there. Like Facebook couldn't build Facebook and spend 10 years in development. It's, let's create Hot or Not. All right, cool. Let's do it at one high school and just see what the reaction is. Every idea you have, you can start small somewhere. And what VCs are looking for are, did you put yourself out there? Did you plan that rollout? Uber didn't try to consume the world. They started not in one city, one neighborhood in one city, and then grew from there and operationalized their lessons learned. And then they did a lot of shady shit along the way, but that's neither here nor there. You have to be able to get your foot in the door, but then you have to also be willing to kind of stand in the arena. And I'm always looking for entrepreneurs who have a very high walkaway factor and have actually stepped into the arena. They're not still ideating and trying to figure it out and telling me that they just need one more feature and one more thing and one more, because they're just scared. And I want somebody who is scared but then overcomes that fear to try to move their company forward. Does that make sense?
Makes a lot of sense. And even just to sort of distill down some of the points that I grasped from it is, it's a founder forward or a founder first perspective. So you don't really care about the product. You don't really care. I mean, obviously it's critical when we talk about sort of the latest stages of this diligence process or whatever you want to call it. But ultimately, it is that level of conviction and commitment that the founder has, that walks into the room and has both skin in the game and historic experience of actually getting shit done. There's so many people, like I'd say one of the things that I say often is like, I gave a woman an idea. It's $1 billion idea. It's a multi-billion-dollar idea. It's an idea around monitoring the breast milk that comes out from she actually went and found the technology for it. And she's like, I'm already going into these levels of research. My fiance just had our first child 5 months ago. And so I was like,
congratulations.
Thank you. So it's like, it's such an unfair advantage for women who are bottle feeding versus breastfeeding to understand exactly how many meals their child has consumed. And so like, how does this not exist? Yeah. And I'm like, and she keeps coming back to me saying like, listen, like, I want to get you involved. Like, this was all your idea. And I said, look, I'm not doing anything with it. Like, there are a dime a dozen ideas. It's all about execution and it's all about actually following through. Have at it. And I hope, I wish you all the success in the world. I'm just not going to, if I get to it, we're talking 3 to 5 years down the track and someone's probably going to have that idea or execute it and off they go to the races. So anyway, back to the point.
Sorry, I got to commend you because that is such I hope people listening understand the nuances to what you said. And it was two different things. One, you just, you led with value. I do the exact same thing. Like, I hate people and people can, I implore people, when you think you're being cute or you think you've got like a one-up on somebody, chances are they know what you're doing. Like, human beings are natural bullshit meters. We sense authenticity like dogs sense fear. When you're trying to be shady, it never works out well. And like, I love the same, like I love giving value and thinking about value and not trying to like hold back because I don't want to, people do this a lot of times in peer groups, especially within the same company. I don't want to teach you everything that I know because then you'll be competitive to me. No, man, come on. Just, I'm an open book. Like, if I have an idea for you, I'll give it to you. And if I have value I can add to you, if I have advice I can give you, and I also want to learn from you, that fair exchange of ideas is so powerful because you're right. It's what you do with it that matters. And that's why I always, going back to that NDA comment, the reason why I always told entrepreneurs I'm not going to sign your NDA is like, I'm not trying to steal your idea. You know how busy I am? I can barely keep my eyes open right now. Like, I don't have time to steal your business and go try to build another business while I'm running these other businesses. But in all fairness, I know that's happened and some people do that. And so entrepreneurs should always protect themselves and should always lead with, trying to capture that value and the attention of people. I love execution matters, and being able to just riff with people and be authentic and help people with no expectation of a return. It's so powerful.
Mate, the gift of giving without the expectation of reciprocation is honestly, for me, probably the most fulfilling thing that I do in my everyday. It's the best. And to your point as well, you're a busy guy. You're investing in. You've built a vehicle. You built a business to invest in companies. You haven't built a vehicle to steal someone's idea and build that exact company.
You won't be in business very long if you do. And I think that's maybe another point I will tell people. Man, this is the smallest big world in the universe. You cannot. People will, I think, do that. They'll be like, even if it's just maybe not giving your all. I always tell people, and we see this a lot in Austin. I'm sure the startup community is just as vibrant in Tel Aviv, if not more vibrant. But, startup communities are kind of interesting, right? Like, it's not filled with a bunch of three-piece suits. You don't know, the girl in shorts and sandals in the back, she's the billionaire. And the dude in the suit is a tax attorney. And, you just don't know who you're dealing with or, where value is going to come from. So just be the best version of yourself all the time. And you won't have to think about, like, what you said, what you did, or did you put the best foot forward. And I think that's so important for people to understand that someone's always watching. You are certainly always watching. And so I think you'd call it I know I've heard that before, the imposter syndrome. It is that, for me, what that means is I want to add value. I want to be appreciative of the opportunities I have. And I want to strive to always be better tomorrow than I was today. And if you do that and you kind of give that value freely, man, it's so rewarding.
Yeah, man.
And people are watching. It actually will. Ironically, it does kind of come back to you sometimes because people will see how you treat other people. And they're like, man, I want to work with that person.
Well, you actually right now just hit on another point I was about to bring up. You hit on two really critical points. You talked about the fact that don't judge a book by their cover, and it doesn't matter who you are and where you're at and what your background is, or what it's not about what you can get from the situation. So the guy wearing no shoes, and it's funny, we were talking about, you were talking before about spending somebody else's money. I don't know if you read today, but Adam Newman's managed to secure $350 million
for Flow.
Yeah, do you know what though? I will back him in because I'm sitting sitting here in a WeWork right now as we record, and the business is brilliant. The business model is brilliant. He flew too close to the sun. And you'd be foolish to think that he hasn't learnt critical lessons to get himself really back on track and to learn from those mistakes that he's had historically. But to my point about perception and about how you look at people, so last week we made an announcement, just launched a joint venture. We stood up a $50 million credit facility where we're going to invest in e-commerce brands to accelerate them to exit, which is super exciting.
Congratulations.
Thank you. And it's great, but I'd say for someone like me who's always been the operator and everything's been bootstrapped and this has been the sort of the mindset, it's like now the work starts. Okay, we've got the vote of confidence, but now the work starts. Now we have to deploy it correctly. We have to support the founders that we're growing and investing in. And we have to actually do the work. And what's crazy to me in all of this is I was the same guy that I was last week before we made that announcement to who I am today. And the market perception and like, you know, the sort of how people talk to you and look at you all of a sudden is altogether different. But I was that same guy, and I'm always going to be authentically the same guy that I was before that. And again, for me, it's still a stepping stone. You know, I'm a child in this world, and I have an unquenchable thirst for knowledge. And so to your point, you know, like you don't be judging people by what even their external perception is and where they're at. Have a conversation and get to know the individual, not the accolades that are promoted on the back end. Because, you know, I'd say in a lot of cases, you might actually find that there's, you know, it doesn't actually line up to their true authentic self.
Yeah. So well said. And I think, I would even take it one step further. You know, some people, you know, that's how you build really good relationships. And it's ironic when you think about, like, you know, celebrities, like, you know, they want to be treated like normal people. I mean, they might not be normal anymore. They might be so removed from normal life that they kind of act a little bit eccentric. But, you know, treating someone as a human being, and basically seeing someone, and like you just said it perfectly, seeing past the accolades and just, you know, talking to them. That's one thing I love about Austin. You know, a lot of celebrities move here because they won't get hounded by people trying to take their picture or bothering while they're eating. You know, you're sitting down at dinner and, you know, Matthew McConaughey or Sandra Bullock walk in and they just sit down and eat and leave and nobody bothers them. And I was sitting next to Joe Rogan just, you know, a week ago, and it's like, you know, nobody cares. And it's like, it's got to be so refreshing to them that they can just be. And I think that's important to remember, that everyone is just doing their best. You know, I heard somebody say the other day, you know, we're not human beings, we're human becomings. And we're just humans becoming something else. You know, we're not being anything. And so understand that everybody's on their own journey. That's something that's really helped me with my relationships. I don't know if anybody's ever heard of this thing called the Myers-Briggs test. But I always made my entrepreneurs kind of go through these. So I'm an ENTJ. I'm pegged out on the bottom right. You know, a lot of Leos are. So I don't know. You probably are. You're probably an ENTJ, even if you tested otherwise.
I'm an ENFJA.
Okay. All right. Yeah. You know. So what's funny about that test, and a lot of people don't realize this, is that's what everyone always says. They say, "What are you?" And a lot of people don't understand what the intent of the test actually is. It's more to find out how someone receives information so that you can better communicate with them, not just as an astrology sign to say, well, this means that I'm confident or I'm a born leader or whatever. Because what happens is you could take, you know, somebody in the workplace, for example, and if someone is a visual learner, barging into their office and saying, I've got an idea, let's start talking, is going to be overwhelming to them. And maybe they're going to give you certain negative energy that you're like, well, what's this person's problem? They're not excited about the business. Or maybe my partner, you must be an introvert. And it's like, it doesn't have to be hostile. What they need is for you to send them some information to digest, then put something on their calendar, and then riff in a respectable way, because that's how they process information. If you need something from them, set them up for success. And so I think a lot of that is helped me understanding like where someone else is coming from, both in the people I lead, but in my personal relationships as well, that everyone's just doing the best they can be. They're being the best version of themselves. Now, that person chewing food, they didn't wake up and say, I'm going to chew this food really annoying to piss off Yanni and Randall. It's like, no. You know, they're just doing their thing trying to eat, and I'm taking exception for something that's making me annoyed. Well, that wasn't their intent. And so like when you understand that people are not usually out to get you, they're doing the best they can on their own journey, you'll give them a little bit more slack when something happens that maybe causes friction. And so I always encourage people to, and when you hear it, you put yourself in their shoes, but it's beyond that. It's really appreciating the other person, their true self, and then trying to get to know that person, not just, you know, waiting for them to stop talking so you can get your point across. It's really understanding what is this person going through. And when you do that to people, especially people with a lot of accolades, they're like, wow, this is refreshing. You know, you're not just asking me for a connection to one of my, you know, buddies to make your next millions. You're actually trying to get to know me. That, you know, you could take that to the bank. That kind of bonding, that kind of relationship, just by treating someone as a human being, is invaluable.
Yeah, I absolutely love that. And I'd say one of the ancillary benefits of actually playing host for the last couple of years here has been my learning to actively listen to people. When you're sitting in the host seat, one of the expectations, if you want to build a good show for your listeners, is you really need to hear and listen. I know you can see me here taking tons of notes. I'm really thinking deeply as to where is the conversation going, what is going to be interesting, what else can I learn, can everyone else learn. And I'd say that's probably been one of the biggest shifts for me. Is I used to be one of those people where I'm thinking about my next word and what I'm going to say and how am I going to be smart and all that stuff. And it's like, well really, like when you really sort of strip it back, and it kills me that we're going to have to jump off this in a second, because I feel like we've got a whole round 2 to go through, because you strike me as someone who I would define as an evolved human becoming. You're
I hope.
in the sense that it's very apparent, at least in the last 40-50 minutes that we've been chatting, that your pretense or your focus on human interaction and your understanding of really, I'd say, like a level of psychology that you've likely invested in helps you navigate so much more than just the books and the methodologies that you learn around business. But mate, I mean, we just can't even get into that now. I'd love to have you back on. So if you'll spend another hour with me,
it would be an honor.
I would love to do it.
Absolutely.
But before I let you go, I would love, we didn't even really get into your businesses today and any of these things, but if there's anything that you haven't communicated that you wanted to communicate, if someone wants to get in touch with you, I mean, let me give you the floor and share.
No, this is what, and we talked about this before. I love what you're doing, and I commend you. I can see why you're successful, and I want round 2, even if it's not recorded. So I'm going to hold you to it. I just want to riff with you. I want to get to know you better. If I can ever do anything for you, please let me know. I want to learn more about your companies as well, because as a growing public company ourselves, there's always ways we can get better about processes, better about a lot of exposure and things that we're doing. I'm easy to find, and I try to be helpful where I can. So it's at Randall Crowder on Instagram. It's Randall Crowder on LinkedIn. I have at Randall Crowder for Twitter, but I can't remember my password. So the one I'm using is actually at Crowder Official until I can figure out what the hell my password was. So easy to find on Twitter. If you want to learn more about Phunware, Phunware.com. We also have a couple cryptocurrencies. We're the first public company to ever do it. So PhunToken.com and PhunCoin.com are 2 of the first digital assets ever to be commercialized by a public company. So that's been a fun ride. In a part 2, we can talk about all of the mistakes I've made as an entrepreneur. I have been through probably every crazy, catastrophic, I want to pull my eyes out, thing that you could ever possibly imagine. So I have a lot of, lessons learned, and hopefully maybe can help other people avoid those lessons in part 2. I think that, reach out to Yanni here and ask him questions. If we ever do a part 2, I'd love to get some audience feedback on what we could talk about that would be more interesting to your listeners. And really, it was just an honor to be on here. So I really appreciate it.
Mate, the pleasure and honor is all mine. And we're definitely, hold me to it. We're doing a round 2 as soon as we can. And yeah, I mean, we're just peeling back the first layer of the onion. We're just scratching the surface here. So, mate, Randall, what can I say? Thank you so much for your time. And it's just a pleasure to know you and to have had the opportunity to ask you a few questions. And I can't wait to get into the next round.
Absolutely. Thank you, Sarah. Congrats on the kiddo. Tell your fiance congrats as well. And I look forward to talking again soon.